Alright, so I think first and foremost, it's fair to acknowledge that for a lot of people, this movie was never going to live up to hopes or expectations. I don't think I'm really taking the minority stance here when I say that The Sopranos sets a pretty high bar with its world building and characters. You know, other than that fucking tumor known as AJ. I mean, they took like 86 hours to tell the stories of these people and still left everyone wanting more. It was always going to be an uphill battle for a 2-hour flick to effectively tell the story of one of the most important characters in the family's pre-show existence, in addition to writing a meaningful relationship arc for him and Tony. Tony being, you know, one of the most beloved characters in the history of entertainment and all that. But even as I turned it on, acknowledging these facts and giving the movie as much leeway as I could, it still seems like they almost didn't even fucking try. But starting with the good, the cast notched their roles out of the park. I really don't think it was possible to do a better job of casting. I've seen a few people kind of dogpiling on the Punisher here, what's his name, John Bernthal, for being devoid of any sign of charisma or personality while playing Johnny Boy, despite the lively nature and strong screen presence of the late Joseph Saravo in his portrayal of the character back in the show. And I agree with the overarching criticism of the character's portrayal, but my question is, like, how the fuck is it Punisher's fault? He's intentionally written to be as flat and cold as possible, with Syl even joking that he's in line for a personality transplant or some shit. This is the Johnny Boy that the writers wanted, and with those guidelines, Mr. Bernthal did a fine job. The movie also looks really good. I'm not a film student or anything, if you guys were wondering, but I know when something looks retarded and when it looks pretty nice, and this falls into the latter category. There's some wonderful set pieces. The cars, the costumes, the lighting, the camera angles and shit. It's pleasant on the eyes, and it's great at immersing you in the period and the world. There is this one part, I won't say which character, but he gets his head blown off by a shotgun blast, and even though the camera cuts away pretty quick, the CGI is less than awesome looking, to be polite. Not a big deal, obviously. It's also packed to the brim with fan service, like we would have expected. No major spoilers here, but I mean, we get the varsity athlete line that the YouTube commenters love. We get Johnny shooting Livia in the hair. We get to see Tony getting his first kind of pseudo-therapy session with a school counselor discussing the topics that are still prevalent in the show. We get to see Silvio's wig fly off. Some good stuff. Alright, on to the less positive things. I want to keep this video kind of brief and free of major spoilers, so I could just call this segment, the rest of it. The rest of it was less positive. But we can say a little more. I've seen the opinion floated by a lot of people that Many Saints should have been a whole new show or a limited series or something, because the writers just didn't have enough time to tell the story properly within the confines of a movie. And if I wanted to be generous and give every benefit of every doubt, I might agree, but I think what's more accurate is that the movie doesn't say a whole lot because they just didn't have that much to say. Dicky Moltisanti, our lead for this story, while, again, being given a great performance by Alessandro Nivola, is just not shown to be the man we would have expected. I mean, the film really wants you to know how much everyone loves him, they tell you 30 fucking times, but that's all it is, it's just exposition in it to you. Instead of really displaying a tangible bond between him and the other characters, or at least showing why specifically he's so adored and respected, they'd rather just assure you that, don't worry, he is in fact Mob Jesus, so let's just keep moving. Alright, but what about Dicky on his own merits? Is he complex and interesting and the kind of character you'd like to watch eat lunch meat in a bathrobe for several hours? He's kind of just got our classic anti-hero vibe going on. He wants to be a better guy and a good influence on people while still providing for his loved ones, but he's not very willing to actually change in that direction and still does some pretty not cool things. It's all shallow though. I mean, yes, showing that a character thinks about behaving one way but ultimately decides to behave in an opposing way does technically display an interior conflict, but simply stating as much is as far as the script could be bothered to go. And I'm not even here saying Dicky needed to undergo some huge transformation and end the film as a different man. He was already less of a prick than most of the other characters. One of the most fundamental and intriguing aspects of Tony Soprano's journey in the show, for example, is that he ends season 6 in exactly the same headspace as he began the series, as exemplified by his conversations with the two therapists. The problem isn't that the movie doesn't really give us anything psychologically interesting, it's that they seem to think they did. Maybe the focus was just in the wrong areas. It's definitely worth noting this film decides to spend its already very limited time focusing on the goofiest shit. Alright, so the rival gang that pops up to challenge the Soprano crew is led by this fella Harold. And while I didn't have my stopwatch out, I know we spend a decent amount of time with him and his escapades. Nothing wrong with that, outside of the fact that he kinda just sucks. He is dreadfully uninteresting, the motivation for his behavior is fucking retarded, and there's no, cunning or interesting philosophy behind him. And I guess I gotta be careful about how I word this, just in case someone tries really hard to be offended. I'm obviously not saying that Harold being upset about racism in the 60s and 70s is retarded. I am saying that making his entire personality the angry about racism black guy, and using that as a justification for murdering a bunch of people, including trying to kill a guy who acted entirely unprejudiced towards him and even gave him a bunch of free money, is shitty writing. And the way they seem to champion him, acting as if he isn't flawed, is just weird and off-putting. This just wasn't a character that needed much screen time. I'll tell you who could have used it though, Tony Soprano. If you caught much of the marketing for this movie, you're probably expecting that its primary focus is the relationship between Tony and Dickie, and specifically how Dickie's mentorship shaped the perspective and aspirations of the impressionable little sociopath. You'd be mostly wrong though. Between the two trailers I saw, I think they quite literally showed every single scene that teenage Tony is in. Maybe they missed one or two, but the point stands, this really isn't a movie about Tony having formative experiences. They put this little bow on at the end and pretend as though that's what this was about, but it feels like the ending to a totally different movie. Like with every other character's relationship to Dickie, they're happy to just tell us that Tony loves him, and maybe show Dickie being nice or giving him advice a couple times, rather than actually crafting experiences for the two that would form the kind of idolizing bond they have. Like, being nice and charming is literally all Dickie did. They chose to artificially make Johnny Boy less charming and paternal so that Dickie could seem better as a role model by contrast, while not actually doing anything tangible to fill that position. And then they legitimately thought, good enough. So in closing, as its own entirely separate work, The Many Saints of Newark is, it's alright. But as a Sopranos prequel that needed to pay respect to the work that came before while contributing to it in meaningful ways, it failed dramatically. As always, if you don't agree and you think I'm way off about something, I would genuinely love for you to let me know. I am always open to having my mind changed. And, sorry about the huge gaps between videos these days, life gets busy and such, but I assure you I'm still on the grind. I'll see you guys later.